Hey guys, what's up? This is Marques with JaxNAP, 421 West Church Street, Jacksonville, Florida. Listen, today we're going to cover ordering colocation, but we're going to focus on ordering power properly so you don't make any mistakes. Okay, when getting into the data center and you figured out the space you need, next comes ordering power. We're going to cover a couple of key items that are important when considering the type of power you're going to be ordering. Number one, is the power circuit whip you're ordering, is it going to be 120 volts or 208 volts? Is it going to be coming in A and B configuration? Is the PDU selection that important to you? You have to find out if the data center is actually going to provide you with the PDU or you're going to have to provide it yourself. You're also going to have to find out if it's a 0U PDU or if it's going to be a rack mounted PDU. Switching and monitoring is important on the PDU. You want to make sure you can actually do your own reboots if possible, and you want to see what your usage is as well. So you also want to make sure there's an amp meter display on the PDU. You have to find out also the type of configuration that you're going to interface with power, whether it's going to be a L520, L530, L620, or L630. We're also going to cover really important common planning mistakes that customers make that end up costing them hundreds of dollars a month. So if you could figure out, you could keep those things in mind when we're planning the power, it will definitely help you save a lot of money in the end. Okay, when you guys are trying to select your power requirements and you're trying to figure out whether you use 120 volts or 208 volts, there's a couple ways of explaining it, and I'm going to try to do it as simply as possible. If you're using 208 power, you can actually fit a larger load of equipment on the 208 power because you're getting twice as much current as you get from the 120 volt power. For instance, a 208 volt power of 30 amps is the equivalent of 120 volts of 60 amps. So therefore, if you look at the bottom of here, I could fit twice as much power for my load. You also have to understand that it's going to also cost twice as much in power. So if I have a circuit here at 120 volts at 20 amps, it's the equivalent of 10 amps of 208 volts. So over here is more common of what people order, okay? So if we start to figure out what kind of equipment we're going to be needing in the data center and what we're coloing, if we select larger routers that require 208, or if we require SANs, I'm going to have to order a 208 circuit. But keep in mind that it's going to cost you twice as much in power. After you figured out whether you need 120 volt power or 208 volt power, some data centers are going to give you the option of A plus B configuration. So what happens is A plus B configuration means is that if you have an A load that's operational, you're going to have a mirrored B side that's going to mirror the power on the other side. So if you have a failure on one side, let's say on A power, all the power will pick up on B side. So you have to take in consideration you might need 2 PDUs for each cabinet. Okay, after you selected the kind of power you need, whether it's 208 or 120, you're going to have to figure out exactly what you need for the PDU selection. You need to find out first if the data center is going to provide you with the PDU, and if so, are they going to provide you with a 0U PDU or a rack-mounted PDU? If you are obligated to actually provide the PDU, I would suggest a couple things. I suggest to use a 0U PDU because it doesn't take any rack space. Also, if you're going to provide a PDU, make sure you have a display, like shown on this PDU to the left, of how many amps you're taking, because it's important to make sure that you don't pop any breakers or cause any load that may be added for capacity inside your rack that cause all your equipment to go down. So if I put in too many servers inside my rack and I have a 120 20 amp circuit and I start to put in 20 servers that all eat 1 amp each, I'm going to end up popping my breaker. You also have to understand a lot of the times the data centers use what's required, and it's called an 80% rule. That means if you have a 20 amp circuit, you're only allowed and required to use only 16 amps of it. You have to keep a threshold from between the 80 and 100% in case there's fans that spin up and you want to keep a little buffer zone in between the 20 amps so you don't pop your breaker. If you have the option of monitoring your PDU, I suggest you take advantage of it. It's important to understand what kind of load you're actually drawing on the PDU and the circuit at the moment you're actually using it. And it's also to keep the data center in check to see if there's any power failures to keep up with the SLAs. Okay, so when you start searching to figure out what kind of PDU you need, it all depends on the kind of circuit you actually ordered. So if you ordered a 110 volt, 20 amp PDU, chances are that the data center is going to provide you with an L520 connector, okay, which is going to be a receptacle. So if you Google and you actually look inside the actual connector type, it should look something over here on the bottom left hand side of the screen. You have also a 30 amp 110, which is a L530 connector. A 208 volt is a L620 connector, and a 30 amp 208 is an L630 connector. So just take a look at the bottom of the screen over here, and then if you get a chance, just go ahead and Google it. Just figure out exactly what the connection looks like. Alright guys, here's the part where I could help you save a whole bunch of money when you're looking to add on some power to your colocation or you're planning for power. So the common mistake is that a lot of people, when they're about to go start colo, they are trying to size up their actual power consumption based upon the actual values that are on the power supplies. For instance, I just grabbed a power supply off the internet just for example. It's a 750 watt power supply. It goes into a Dell 2950, which is an extreme power hog. But just for the sake of a consideration of what we're trying to show you here, don't worry about that. Okay, so the server power in the power supply is 750 watts. So it takes about 6.26 amps of 120 if you're going to size it per the actual consumption, the total consumption. So if you had 10 of these servers, assuming that they took 6.26 amps per server, that's 63 amps total. So that's where people mess up really bad when they're actual sizing up and trying to figure out how many whips they would need, because at that point in time, 63 amps, you'd have to get either two 30 amp 208 circuits, which is going to cost you probably about $2,000 a month, depending on what data center you actually go to. But the actual measurement of the 10 servers can be anywhere from 9 to 13 amps total after you actually measured it. So the actual usage when you actually go to check these servers out and the consumption is the actual configuration. So that means how many hard drives you put in, how much memory, how much CPU, what kind of process is it running? Is it crunching a lot of CPU, because then CPU runs hotter and then the fans kick up and therefore it's actually utilizing more. So this is just a common way to actually, try to size up your power. Don't go by the actual power supply itself, go by the actual measurement of amps of the server. So that's it for today's video. If you guys like what you saw, go ahead and hit like, and if this is your first time, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks a lot.